Hello everybody and welcome to another video on the Descriptify YouTube channel. Descriptify is an initiative through which I share the knowledge I've gathered on building stable process automation code. A couple of weeks back, a dear friend of mine asked me how I manage my RPA libraries. 2 weeks back, I published an article on the value of testing your RPA workflows. Subsequently, I also created a video on a standard snippet you can use for testing. In this video, I answer that question on how I manage my libraries, along with a concrete answer on how I practice what I preached in my article on RPA testing. The topics I'll be covering here are library organization, positive and negative test cases, as well as library management in action, or how you use library management with in your day-to-day processes. This is a somewhat advanced topic, so I will already assume good knowledge of the UiPath automation platform, along with basic knowledge of the UiPath test suite for its purposes. Further, this is a good practice that I've only recently started using. Any suggestions on how things can be done better are most welcome. Please leave a comment below. Firstly, let's think about why you need to test your libraries. Say you're having a dinner party and you've invited 20 guests. While preparing a dish for them, let's say a big pot of soup, I'm sure you're going to taste it and see if things are fine before serving it to everybody. If something needs to be fixed, you would rather do it before everybody's soup bowls are filled. Testing code in a library is the same as testing soup before serving it. Since a library's workflows are used across several RPA processes, it's all the more important to practice rigorous testing when it comes to libraries especially. So now let's take a look at how the library is organized. What you see here is a folder structure where each category of objects or each category of standard workflow objects have their own folder. So in this library that I'm previewing, I have file management, network drive mapping, print as PDF, reporting and queue management as the categories, along with a test folder that serves as a test folder for this entire library. So if I were to click inside file management, I have two standard workflows under file management, which is clear folder and ensure folder. And you can also see that the tests for clear folder are organized within a test folder, which is separate. And the same goes for ensure folder as well. Now, the same is true for an object like print as PDF, where I have one standard object which converts Excel to PDF, and I have tests for this object organized in its own test folder. So in summary, what I do is I take each of these library objects or standard workflows in a library, put them inside their own folder, which is organized at a category level. And within each of these categories, I have the standard objects themselves along with their tests in their own folder. Further, each test folder, if I were to click into each of these test folders, they have, as you can see, positive as well as negative test cases. And in some cases, I also have the test data stored in an Excel file, and this is especially true for data-driven test cases. We'll be previewing all of this stuff with an example. So if this is not clear, please bear with me. Let us preview the tests I have for one standard object, which is convert Excel to PDF. Now, this is a standard workflow that uses some code that converts an Excel file to a PDF file. So what I have here, the tests to test this code are some positive and negative test cases. But what is a positive and a negative test case? A positive test case is when the code actually functions the way it does and carries out its designated task, in the sense the PDF is actually successfully created. So that is a positive test case. A negative test case is for some reason that the code encounters a problem and is not able to complete the creation of the PDF, but still the test case is passed only when, even if it's not able to create that PDF, it throws the right error message or behaves in the right manner. So a negative test case, in other words, tests the behavior of a workflow when things go wrong. Some more concrete examples here. You can see some, if I open the data file here, you can see some of the positive test cases that are listed out. I only have 2 positive test cases for this file, which is XLSX and XLS as the inputs. So if this workflow receives an XLSX file as an input, then this is the test case that tests it out. And if it alternatively receives an XLS, it should also go ahead and convert it into PDF, and that is tested with this workflow. When it comes to the negative test cases, you can see there are some of the test cases that I have here are input file not found and PDF file already open. So if the input file path is not valid, obviously it cannot be converted to a PDF, and that is one test case. And if the file that we are trying to convert or the destination path for the PDF already has a PDF document open, now that also cannot be successfully carried out. So that is another negative test case. Here's a note about the test folder. So what the test folder does is it actually holds the test files needed for carrying out the tests in the library. I'm holding the test folder also within the library structure so that when this library is transported to another computer, that person can run the tests right away, as opposed to creating these folders somewhere else in a temporary file or in a different location. I can run these tests on any client right now. And just to give you an example of what is there in the test folder, there are the sample files that are the XLSX and XLS file that need to be converted as part of the print as PDF. And also a case to simulate if file is already open, if there's a PDF file or an Excel file. All right, so now we come to the exciting part where we can actually start running some of these tests. So let me close the workflow, and I'm going to firstly run all of these tests locally and see how they perform. So let me pick out the ones which are not data driven first and then run them. You can see that the 2 negative tests that I just previewed have actually thrown errors, but they are errors that were expected, and that's why the verification was passed on both counts. And also a quick note here on the difference between data-driven test cases and test cases that are not data-driven. A data-driven test case usually relies on a data file like this Excel file to provide the test cases or to provide the different test scenarios for its operation. So let's go ahead and actually also test the data-driven test cases. For example, the positive test case here is going to test these 2 cases where it's an XLS and XLSX file. So if I were to run the data-driven test case here, and if I open it up, I can say run file with data variations, select all the different data types and run it. So there you go. The data-driven test case has passed, and now for the last data-driven test case, I'm also going to pass it with data variations. So now let us move on to seeing a library management in action. The idea is that whenever you have a library object that is modified, this library object needs to pass all the tests before it can be published to a newer version. And so to preview that, let me open the library object itself. And here you see in the object, it tests for null input with string.isNull a white space for the Excel file as well as the PDF file. I'm going to modify this by extending this a little by saying also check if the string is null or empty, and for the same parameter. Similarly, I'm going to do this for the PDF itself. I've successfully modified my code. I'm going to save this. I know that this is a trivial example, but it will serve as well for our illustration. Now I need to ensure that all of the tests that I have are going to pass. So I'm going to actually run the 2 tests that are not data driven first. they have passed without a problem. Now going on to the data-driven test cases, I can always say run file with data variations. And finally, the null input file tests, which are also data-driven. Okay, so now this test case, this workflow has passed all the tests that are necessary for it. And now I can safely go ahead and commit this change or I can publish this change to the common library that several processes are using. In essence, I've tasted the soup and made sure that it is fine to serve to all the guests. Of course, a couple of things to note here. It really helps that you can organize tests as well in the same folder or in the same library as the objects themselves. And that is one of the greatest advantages of having the UiPath test suite. You could alternatively also publish these tests, just like publishing a process, to the orchestrator and run them from there. I'm not going to preview that here, but you get the idea. So in effect, you could have a rule whereby if any developer makes a standard change to the library, they have to pass all the tests on their local computer, and also have an additional governance check where the tests on the orchestrator also have to pass for that code to be rolled out to the rest of the team. In this video, I've outlined how I manage my library using tests for each object in the library. As I've mentioned, I would love to hear your feedback on this topic in the comments below. If you find this video useful, hit the subscribe button to keep up with new videos I'll be posting here. Until next time, I wish you happy and stable automation.